Oh, hey guys. Welcome. I'm Raj Patil, founder of Admissionado. Joining me is Mr. Rob Gleeson.
What's up? How are you, Rob?
Um, I'm fantastic. Tell us where you're from, where you're speaking to us from.
I am currently sitting in beautiful Chicago, Illinois.
Let
It's
me
like
ask you,
45 degrees out today, which after a long Chicago winter, you're just like, oh, this is the most beautiful day of my life.
45 degrees. It's good. It's very good. You're
Where are
doing
you?
great. I'm in Los Angeles. We are also 45 plus a few more
I can't compete with that.
degrees and yeah. But thank you for joining us, one and all. We are here today to talk to you a little bit about interviews and specifically the Stanford interview, GSB. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to open with just a quick um, overview of the elements that are specific to Stanford. Then part two, we're going to talk a little bit about strategy, and it's going to be foundational. I'm going to take a little bit of time here before we get into the meat, and I don't mind this because for me, this is um, it's foundational for the whole frickin' effort. So we're going to sink into it a little bit, and then section three really get into the nuts and bolts of how to actually prepare. Do a real deep dive into procedural tactics for getting your interview strategy set. And then we'll close it, hug it out, and we'll be done. So lots to say about interviews and interview prep. We're just going to touch on a few things that hopefully add to your research, maybe give you a cool starting point if you're just starting out, and hopefully you walk away with a few tasty nugs of new strategy. So with that, let's get into section. Do you appreciate that, by the way?
I did. I think that's exactly what we want to set up.
Okay, a quick sidebar.
Yes.
Uh, I said nug, and I couldn't get the a chicken nugget out of obviously chicken nuggets out of my head. Favorite fast food nugget?
Honestly, McDonald's.
I don't think you can beat the McDonald's nug.
It's
Is that a controversial statement? But I don't know.
because there are some people out there that are very pro Wendy's. They love a Wendy's chicken, whatever.
I'll allow it. Although I've only been to Wendy's twice lifetime. It's a very I don't can't explain it.
Yeah, that's all right. And then there's
Okay.
Chick-fil-A people. They're like very passionate. But you know
Yep.
what? I grew up in a McDonald's house.
Yeah. All right. More to say about that.
All right.
Really there should have been five sections.
That should be the fifth
But
section.
it's too late. It's too late. It's too late. All right. Section one, Stanford interview, GSB. Okay. There are a lot of peculiarities to the Stanford interview. Let's just cover some of the highlights. Number one, they are famously blind interviews versus non-blind, which means that mostly alumni are going to be the ones conducting the interview. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. The second thing that's Stanford is famous for is they are very high on industry and background match. So whatever your industry is, you're likely to be interviewed by someone from that industry, someone who shares your background. The third thing of note is this is what you'll read a lot about, is that they favor behavioral style questions. Okay. Ooga booga. That's a big thing that, people are very excited about. We'll talk to you about what it is and how much to or not pay attention to that. And then the fourth noteworthy nug is that they're going to take around 40 to 50% of interviewees. So another way to think about that is for every seat available, they will probably interview around two people, right, for every spot. I think those are all good to know. Now, Rob, you have experience conducting interviews for Kellogg, and obviously have friends in high places at other schools and tons of experience running interviews. I wanted to ask you if you wanted to just give us general insights into the process and how schools use rubrics and things like that for scoring and evaluating.
Yeah, totally. So look, even if you're getting an alum, you should know that they've received some sort of training from the school, right? The school is looking for very particular things. They've given that person a rubric that they're going to fill out after their interview. But they've been trained. They're not just coming into this willy-nilly so they can like bounce around and chat with, be a big shot for half an hour and then walk out. They've been told what the school's looking for. They've got a rubric. They know, how to read people. So it's not like you're just meeting some alum that doesn't know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. And what's on that rubric is very specific to the school. The rubrics are typically very protected. But from a very high level, they're looking for things that are hard to quantify on one hand, right? Like confidence and passion, this stuff that's a little bit softer and you sort of need to sit down with someone to get a feel for that. Because it's hard in an essay to tell how confident they are, how passionate they really are about their industry, their goals. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, they're looking to make sure that you have a clear and compelling goal. And that why you want an MBA and all that stuff that might be written in your application. They want to hear it verbalized to see how clear and compelling it is in person.
Yeah, and I mean, it's almost like there's between the resume lines, we talk about the essay as giving an opportunity to get in between those bullets, and the interview takes it even one step further. So now they can see body language, or they can see other human elements that don't necessarily have their place in a 454-word essay or whatever.
Exactly.
I can't leave this section without asking you about your attitude toward the word rubric. I find myself, I can't stop saying it.
If I was a rapper, I'd be Lil Rubric. I think it could be a good rapper name.
Lil apostrophe Rubric?
I think so, maybe, yeah. Don't you like it? Rubric.
Is it one of the top 3 words that are most fun to say? I don't know. We'll poll our audience. Rubric. What the hell's not to like? It's amazing.
Rubric?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know.
Okay. And with that, section 1, we've just reviewed basically the nuts and bolts of things specific to Stanford. Now, section 2 is what do we do with this? How do we develop a strategy to prepare for our interview? Now, we're going to say some stuff here that this is our particular take. There are a lot of ways to deal with that information, but we're going to recommend something that may be a little controversial, which is, in effect, to mostly ignore all of it. And that's not 100% accurate. Really, it's not to ignore it so much as we want to utilize that information very smartly. Okay, so let's start with the blind versus non-blind bullet. What does it mean? How do you make an adjustment? The idea is that a non-blind interview, so to speak, is conducted by someone who has access to your entire application, all the elements of your application, so your essays, your letters of recommendation, all the pieces. But the idea is that a blind interview, so from an alumnus located somewhere else, for example, they're only allowed to see your resume, and that's the only thing they're allowed to go on. So they haven't seen your essays, they haven't seen all the other constituent pieces of your application. They know comparatively less about you. This tends to be a very bolded and exclamation pointed buzzword when it comes to researching how to prepare for the Stanford interview. And in our view, it's very tempting to overthink this. And so again, our take is to not. Why do we say that? Well, it's Rob, I'll let you take it, but basically it steers you down an unproductive path. And Rob, maybe you can say more about that.
Yeah. Straight up, if you're so worried about whether or not it's blind or not blind and what this other person knows about you, you are trying to game the interview, and you shouldn't. It's like, stop trying to game the interview. You're getting way too far in your head, and that's the worst place you can be in an interview. You know this, right? Like, think about a first date or something like that. The last thing you want to be is in your head about what does this person know, or what are they thinking, what are they feeling? No, you just want to be confident, right? So you shouldn't focus your time and your prep and your energy, trying to figure out how you prepare because it's blind or it's not blind. No, because the guy who doesn't worry about that kind of stuff, he comes across as the guy who doesn't worry about that kind of stuff. Like, he comes across as confident and badass and saying, look, I'm confident in my stories And no matter what you may know or not know about me, I'm ready to answer anything you throw at me. That is how you want to come across in your interview. And I just don't think you can achieve that level of confidence and just like calm and presence if you are so far in your head worrying about, you know, whether it's blind or not blind, and whether, you know, how you adjusted your prep in relation to that.
Yeah, I could not agree more. It's a difficult thing to trace in someone's performance. As vapor that comes off of your body language, and confidence is very amorphous. But it's one of those things where, to go back to your dating analogy, like the guys and girls in the bar, the people who don't care are more attractive. They're exuding a kind of, yeah,
Totally.
right. And so that's sort of what we're getting at.
Yeah, and we're not saying don't prepare.
No, no,
Obviously,
no. We're going to get into that
before you go on the
hard.
date, you take a shower, you get dressed, you look in the mirror, you still prepare, but we're saying the way that you prepare should not change just because it's blind or not blind.
That's right. So the strategic, well, that's right. That's section 3, right? Is our okay. Okay. So that general principle is going to apply to mostly everything. So the next bullet is this idea of uh, behavioral questions. A lot of emphasis on behavioral questions, and it sounds kind of spooky. My screen stuttered, by the way, so it went from you looking this way, and then it cut to you doing this.
Mm-hmm.
This is amazing.
Good.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. So Rob, tell us a little bit about what behavioral questions are and aren't, and why we should be terrified or not terrified.
Yeah, I mean, look, what they're trying to do with behavioral questions is get a deeper sense of who you are, how you've responded to certain situations in your work, your professional life, your personal life. You know, rather than asking you a case question or to do a math problem, they're trying to get a sense of how you process problems, how you think critically, how you handle stress. Trying to get a sense of how you behave. So it sounds scary, I think, but in reality, you probably have tons of stories that, you know, if you dig through your past, like we do with our clients, there's tons of things that will knock it out of the park for behavioral questions, and it just makes them a lot less scary once you get a handle on those.
When we get to the part where we're reviewing typical questions, you're going to notice that they are actually very familiar because they are typical application essay questions. They're not, you know, it's to questions about leadership, questions about a time you felt, you know, what was things you're most proud of, things like that. So it's a buzzword that, again, can kind of get in your head, steer you off course, and force you to sort of fixate away from more meaningful preparation. So
yeah, well said.
Again, so we're going to keep hitting this idea that when you turn off that instinct to worry about, oh, the Stanford has the blind interview and the behavioral questions, and just switch that instinct off and focus again on the part that you can control, which is your narrative. And mastering the narrative is what we're going to talk about in section 3. Again, just like the blind interview piece, you're going to emerge seeming more confident, and it's going to happen just because you switched off that instinct to focus on the wrong stuff. So let's go to one more piece, which I thought we here at Admissionado think is really interesting, which is the idea of what do you do with that information that for every one seat they're interviewing 2 people. A lot of ways to just sort of parse that. Here's what I would recommend. First of all, and picture this with me. And I'm just going to keep the numbers kind of simple. Imagine I'm going to make up, let's say there's 100 interviewees total, right? This idea is that Stanford is going to, let's say, offer seats to 40 or 50 of those people, right? Let's just say 50 just for fun. Imagine a dashed line right at between the 50th and 51st person. So now you've got 50 people above the line and then 50 people below the line. So what I think is a useful exercise is to think about what is it do we think the people who are above the line have in common compared to the people below the line? What did the people who get the offer performed in a certain way that contributed to their getting the offer do or say, or how did they behave? Who are they? What do they have in common compared to the below the line people, right? So this is a sneak peek at our rubric. Rubric. We should play a drinking game by the way. Every time we say rubric, you know. But so what do these above the line people have?
It's an important question.
In a nutshell, right? It's going to be, and again, this is our take. Well, and also true. Some combination of leadership. These guys are scoring high on leadership, mold breaking tendencies, strong introspection, super high passion, incredible goals. And of course, the X factor, which is that these 50 people above the line all kind of fit together with each other in the minds of the admissions committee in such a way that that particular cohort is the strongest combination of people. So there's no way to actually plan for that in your approach. That's always an X factor that's outside of your control. But so when we're talking about things that are within your control and things that are not within your control, and this is kind of a weird concept. Rob, help me out if I get a little bit fuzzy on it, but you can't be a guy that's below the line and fake your way into being above the line by just saying the right thing, okay? By kind of parroting something you saw on the Stanford website, and kind of copying and pasting a phrase you think is going to resonate with them. The way that you get above the line is by doing your homework to figuring out what elements in your stories actually reveal very impressive aspects of leadership. What elements of your stories revealed your mold breaking tendencies so that they start to sparkle, right? So that kind of homework is the needle moving effort that you can make to get yourself above the line. So that distinction is, we hear it. This is sort of going back to what those initial blind interview behavioral questions. People are keen to try to get inside the head of what Stanford wants, and then to kind of say something specific that then sits on top of. The other way of doing it is here's a way to find your way to the bottom. Okay, you haven't done your homework to figure out what makes your stories actually noteworthy in the eyes of Stanford or any top school. So you haven't actually brought those elements forward, and then you just sort of slather on those key phrases that you think are going to resonate. Believe it or not, this is a common tendency. We see people have this instinct, and this is why we are trying to steer people away from it. People are overemphasizing these things that are specific to the Stanford interview. So our advice is to scrap all that, do your homework, okay? And we're going to get to that in section 3, which is what do you actually need to do with your profile, with your stories, to expose all of the correct stuff. And when you do that, that's the stuff that actually gets you into that above the line fold. Okay, so Rob, tell us a little bit about what someone could, let's say you are an above the line guy, okay? And you've got the goods, you've got everything that's sort of like you're bumped and set to be that guy. What might you say by accident or maybe even innocently that might count against you and make them toss your ass below the line?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if you were to admit, like, what I really want is an MBA for my resume, huge red flag, right? It just undermines all the work you've done in your essays, and it undermines whatever goals you've told them about.
Even if it's true, right? Even if it's silently true.
An MBA for your resume, or an MBA so you can make a ton of money. That just, like, if you say that or that comes out, that it's over. It's over then and there. I think wanting the right thing, right? It's okay to want a great job at McKinsey or Goldman Sachs or whatever, but wanting the right thing for the wrong reason. So, you should want your job at McKinsey because you're interested in diverse industries and problem solving and making healthcare more efficient because you have a personal tie to healthcare or whatever it is. But saying I want to work at McKinsey so I can make partner and, have premier status on American Airlines and then make a ton of money. Again, it's like, why, you're instantly going, you're a guy who's got all this potential, who's got great experience, great exposure, boom, you'll fall below the line like that. I think also maybe not knowing enough about the school compared to others. As much as we talk about your strategy for prep is your strategy for prep, it's 90-10. There is that 10% where you need to do work about the school and you need to know what makes it unique. And if you go into a Stanford interview and you say, I love the case method, it's probably not going to fly. It's not going to look good.
Yeah. So again, back to our main theme here, everything that you just said, right? These are things to avoid, like in your Stanford interview, right? Don't talk about case method. Don't say that I want an MBA to burnish my resume. It's not like this is where I keep returning to. It's not like any of those things that you just said would somehow fly at a different school, right? So these are universal mistakes or universal things to avoid.
Which gets back to the Admissionado approach, which is like you prep for interviews the way, you're prepped for interviews. You should work hard, you should work long, but it doesn't change depending on which program is up next.
Right. Okay. So let's get into that 10% for a second. You referenced 90-10. We will talk about in your preparation and in your overall pie of dedication, the pie of dedication.
Right? Your time pie you're talking about?
The pie of dedication. I was referring to the time allocation.
Yeah.
And energy spent toward things, right?
Yeah.
So 90% toward doing the internal digging and getting your story straight, mastering the narrative. And then the 10%, though, are smart adjustments that you, of course, need to make for every school that you're interviewing at. The same way you wouldn't talk about how much you love Bain's culture at your McKinsey interview. You have to make minor adjustments that make sense. You talked about case method. Of course, you wouldn't say that at the Stanford interview. So let's talk about this 10%. Now, this is where a lot of ways to approach this. And the classic mistake that we see is folks will consult. They will try to, I think you used this phrase before, is game the interview. They will try to get inside the head of, well, what is it this person is looking for? What vibe are they looking for? What keywords can I say that are going to impress him? Can I name drop? We don't think any of that is effective, mostly because it isn't. Stanford's really smart, very perceptive and smart.
Yeah, most have MBAs. They're going to see right through it.
See right through it. So here's a different tactic that'll cut through all of the noise and get you to the exact place you need to be. And this should be not unfamiliar to many of you because you spent hours writing the response to this in a lot of your essays, which is the idea of justifying, why this school. Okay, but here's our twist. It's not just what is your reason for wanting to choose Stanford or what's your reason for wanting to study Stanford. It goes a little deeper than that. The idea is, think of this as a chemical equation, okay? There's you, and you're this chemical element, and you're going to react with this environment, some environment. So Stanford's one environment, right? The idea is, and you're going to, sorry, let me finish that. And it's that combination of you plus this environment is going to lead to a chemical reaction that leads to some future you, okay? Some elevated potency, right? Capability, future potential of success. So play that over again, but just replace Stanford with a different environment. So you as a chemical substance now interact with, let's say, the 78th ranked school on Earth. And that chemical reaction is going to lead to another version of you. What you need to argue to Stanford at its simplest level is the ways in which that first reaction, the combination of you plus Stanford, okay, leads to a more exciting, a more promising, a better, bigger, cooler future you. But of course, you can't just say it, right? The justification is the part that actually is going to force you to explain all the ways in which you're fit with Stanford, the ways in which Stanford will specifically help shore up your weaknesses and help strengthen your existing strengths. All of those elements, the way in which, as a plant, you're going to be watered at Stanford is going to make you, blossom the most. Forcing yourself to come up with a very impassioned sell that you really need to believe. You have to actually sell the hell out of this. In doing so, you are going to end up making all of the adjustments that you need to be Stanford appropriate. Okay, yes. So that's the point. So this is like you get there, but you don't aim for it. If you aim for it, you're going to miss. Okay, so this process gets you to the desired endpoint is the whole idea.
Here's one of my favorite hacks is imagine that you got an invite from every one of your schools, your target list. Go even further, right? Say that you've got an offer for a free ride from every target school on your list, except for Stanford. Now, still make a case to me for why Stanford is the place you should be. What you were saying is, look, the combo of me and Stanford, that leads to a better version of me in the future. Like only at Stanford can I become the best person that I can possibly become, and here are the specific reasons. And then straight up do that with every program. It's like Mad Libs, where it's your name, and then the other side of the sentence is like the best version of future you, and the only blank in the sentence is the school. So right. Go through like a roulette wheel. You should be able to spin it. Any program it lands on, you should be able to make a case that's that strong. Even though you have a free ride at every other program, why is this program still the best for you? Why are you still willing to pay every nickel and dime for it? That's how good your answer has to be. And that's sort of a good way to hack it to get to that point.
I love that because it forces you to Stanford's actually kind of a bad example for that because it happens to probably be everyone's first or second choice ever, right?
Yeah.
The reverse version of it's actually even cooler, right?
Right.
Imagine being, so this is what we tell all of our folks, like imagine, well, for Stanford, maybe Harvard is a good sort of like, here's why I wouldn't go to Harvard. Mm-hmm. Harvard's giving me a free ride, but there's something about the 2-year experience at Stanford, right? And you have to kind of explain why it is that you believe that you will bloom better at Stanford. And you have to sell it and be really specific.
Your wording. Your answer is not going to be why you wouldn't go to Harvard. Your answer is why Stanford's the best choice for you.
Is even better.
Harvard's the best choice for you, or why this program. Exactly.
Yeah, and so it might be Harvard might be better for someone else, but here's why it isn't better for me. Here's why Stanford's better for me. And you do that, by the way, just like Rob said, you flip a switch and someone says, okay, now go Kellogg, right? And now you have to explain, and this is where it gets more interesting, just as an exercise, because it forced you to say, listen, Stanford and Harvard just gave me free rides.
Mm-hmm. Why?
But I'm going to choose to pay to go to this other school.
Yeah.
Because I believe that in doing so, I'm going to end up better. And, it forces you to justify it, sell me on it.
It forces you to do the work, do the research, and to have a great answer to that question. And quite frankly, if you want to be above the line after that interview, you have to have a great answer to that question. I don't care what program it is or where it's ranked. You have to have a stellar answer to that question.
Yeah. So that's kind of the end of our section 2. We're talking about strategy here. The idea is it's sort of trying to simplify what can be a very messy process that leads you down a lot of wrong paths. Okay. You're going to focus on 2 things. Okay. 90% of your effort is going to focus on getting your story straight and figuring out what elements to highlight and how to highlight them. That's coming up in section 3, right? The remaining 10% is to focus you on just this single question of being able to justify this chemical equation of you plus this school is the best version of you. And if you can do that, so why do we recommend this strategy? If you can effectively do those 2 things, congratulations, you will be prepared for a blind interviewer, a not blind interviewer, a guy that's going to ask you behavioral questions, non-behavioral questions, a guy that's going to throw curveballs at you that you couldn't have anticipated. You will be prepared for everything. That's why we recommend that.
It'll give you that vapor that you talked about before. That vapor.
That's right.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Not unlike Al Pacino, give me all you got.
Totally.
Give me all you got. Now, of course, his version's a little bit, it's not as animated as what I just did.
Wow.
Have you seen that, by the way? Have you seen like a Heat? Give me all you got.
Do you want to get into this right now?
20 seconds, yeah.
I've not.
You haven't seen Heat?
See, this is why I said, do you want to get into this right now?
Oh my God.
Raj, there's a time and a place.
Here's what's going to happen. Provided we have the legal right to link to, a Hollywood movie, we'll have to look into it. Al Pacino's line reading of "Give Me All You Got" it's just, there are no words. There are no words to describe it. We're gonna have to. My God. Okay.
Let's see if we can link to it.
We'll have to do it. We'll have to figure out. Well, we can allude to it, right? Okay. But okay, so that's section 2. That's the Admissionado strategy. Congratulations. And also, if you haven't seen Heat, we recommend watching it. Section 3. Now we get into the real practical rubber meets road portion, which is, well, how do you prepare? Lots of ways to prepare. What do you actually do? Now, we don't have enough time to get into super specifics and kind of workshop actual individuals and story elements, but we'll kind of survey some stuff, and we're going to allude to, here's the beauty, by the way, as much fun as it is for me to be looking at you, Rob, the audience right now, we're going to be talking about a spreadsheet, and they have to imagine it. So that's kind of fun. That's awesome. So we'll have to describe the spreadsheet. It's a gorgeous spreadsheet. You'll just have to take our word for it. It's beautiful. But we will make this available to you guys. Just click a link or someone will spark it up, but you'll be able to get this and utilize it afterward. But okay, so let's get into it. How do you prepare for this? How do you prepare for the Stanford interview and all interviews, right?
All interviews.
What should you expect? Well, let's look at questions that you're likely to get. And the best place to look is at actual questions that actual Stanford interviewees have gotten or are getting. These are findable online, by the way. Lots of resources and sites that post these. Of course, we have our own sources of our folks are giving us feedback all the time. But let's go through a couple questions. You're going to recognize a lot of them because they are not weird and strange. You've probably answered a lot of them in your application essays already. Things like, what extracurricular activity are you most proud of? Or name something that something unique you bring to our program. Or tell us about a time at work when you seized an opportunity to improve an organization or to leave impact. Talk about a time when you worked with difficult people. So you sort of get the flavor. These are not bizarre McKinsey, you have to have, it's not out of left field. These are typical questions that you've probably answered again a million times already. Now, extrapolate the sum potential of the questions available to you. There's hundreds, thousands of questions, right? You couldn't possibly, well, a bad way to prepare for it is to actually just go through each question and prepare an answer for every single one. So what do? Lots of methodologies. Here's our take. We, again, have alluded to 6 major categories as part of a rubric that are the kind... 6 categories that are valued highly. Okay, the prized categories. I'm going to just go over the 6, and then we'll take them one by one and do a deep dive. Leadership is 1. Okay, obvious. It's kind of classic. 2 is breaking the mold. 3rd category, viewing within. What do we mean by viewing within? Introspection, self-evaluation, self-criticism. 4th category, kind of a sister category, is viewing without. Okay, your observations, your sources of inspiration. Number 5, real motivation. motivation, but we put the word real in front of it because you'll see why in a second, but actual, genuine, hardcore motivation. Number 6, an excellent plan. Okay, having a really, really, really solid plan. We'll talk about each of these 6 in a second. But okay, so now those are the 6 categories, Rob. Let's tell folks what to actually do with them. Let's take each one of these and pick it apart a little bit.
Sure.
So I'll kick it over to you to talk about leadership.
Sure. Okay. So in the first category in our spreadsheet that you're picturing in your head, leadership is the category. Why is this its own category? Look, leadership, you can be really smart, you can have great business success, you can be good at executing, you can be introspective, but like on top of all of that, there are still people that have that, but still lack leadership. And for top business schools, leadership reigns supreme. Like leadership carries the day every time. And you need to show that you have it. You should expect that it's going to come up in the interview in some way or another, like proving out that you've got some seeds of leadership, right? That there's something in you that's capable of that. And so things to think about within this category, they're going to ask about, like times you've led a team, right? Or, talking about where the challenge was the size of the team, or the challenge was the personalities within the team. Your specific values as a leader, what you strive to do, what kind of leaders you look up to, what's your project management style, stuff like that is going to start to bring out the leadership that they want to see.
So leadership, I guess the reason we talk about those categories or those facets is that leadership does not always mean the same thing. There's different ways that to exhibit leadership.
Right.
And so for your particular brand of it, or your version, so everyone has a leadership story or 2 or 3 or more, but the ways in which they demonstrated their particular brand of it, we kind of break out these questions this way to help you tease out what your particular slice was, right? And if you don't do it that way, the liability is that you start to talk about leadership too generally. Okay, I helped turn the company around from X to Y through strong leadership. Well, what the hell does strong leadership mean? It matters if the hurdle that you in particular overcame was by converting 2 or 3 ridiculously obstinate people. Okay, and by example, it had this ripple effect over the organization. We'll walk us through the way in which you converted those 3 people from this position to the desired position. Now, again, the reason we're talking about this is if you haven't drilled down deep enough to identify it at that level, to isolate the specific facet of leadership that's worth talking about, you might end up the leadership that you're talking about in your Stanford interview stays at the surface level. Okay, and the only thing that the listener or the interviewer is privy to is the fact that you turned the company around from X to Y and you exhibited strong leadership. So that's all they have. Now, if you do the homework this way, and it forces you to, when you're telling your story, isolate the specific nuance to your version. Now the guy goes, oh, I can sort of picture this guy doing this incredibly difficult thing. The leadership starts to ring in a different way. That's kind of the point to these elements. So that's leadership. And we're going to do that same thing with the remaining 5 elements. And then we're going to, after we go through the elements in the spreadsheet, we'll tell you how to use them with your stories. Okay, but this is just the background table setting. So that was leadership. The next category is breaking the mold. And I love the way of trying to ask ourselves, well, why does this deserve its own category? Rob, you did that with leadership to say that there are traits that you can have without being a good leader that are valued. Same thing with breaking the mold. You can be an incredible leader. You can be an incredible executor of things. You can be ridiculously smart, ridiculously capable, ridiculously well-liked, introspective, all those things. But what if you're an inside-the-box thinker? What if you're a guy that has ridden success simply by staying very narrowly inside the same lane? Now that has allowed you to get to where you are now, but might not be as bankable if there were geopolitical, ruptures or disruptors in the industry, right? It's also not as inspiring if you're only able to think inside a very particular frame of thought. So, uh, another way of thinking about this is if given two people with roughly the same, uh, positive characteristics and accomplishments and goals, if one of them is an inside the box thinker and the other guy exhibits the tendency to think about things in a new and innovative way, there's something that's his possibilities uh, are bigger, better, or more exciting, right? So now to isolate those facets, there are ways to talk about, figure out elements in your story to bring these out. So for example, um, approaching a problem that had an otherwise standard procedure with a new and fresh mindset, or you change the minds of the old guard, right? Those are always really cool stories. At times you went against the grain, questioned authority, lots of different ways. So when you are looking at any of your stories, leadership stories, team building stories, failure stories, whatever it is, and you're going through the spreadsheet, you get to this section, you can try to figure out if there are any aspects of your story that are worth talking about that reveal any ways in which you were a mold breaker, right?
I think that's great. I think that's exactly right. So, okay, for the next one, we talk about viewing within. So really, this is introspection, right? I think if you did a study and looked at the people who trend upward in life, who are successful, a lot of them do so because they are constantly pursuing better, right? They're constantly trying to improve on themselves, on their work. And a big part of that is because they're open to self-examination and they're willing to sort of do a postmortem analysis and think about what could I have done better? What could I have done differently? That kind of introspection often goes hand in hand with EQ, right? It shows this level of self-awareness and awareness of others that business schools like lust for. They love that stuff. So to a certain degree, this is one of the categories that we think is really important for your prep and yeah. So thinking about what kind of stories will fit or what they're going to be looking for. Think about times, you experienced self-doubt or you failed at something that you weren't sure if you'd succeed at, or even better, if you failed at something that you were positive you would succeed at. A time you were humbled by a subordinate or by a superior or a colleague. A time you wanted to give up but didn't. All of these are going to start to show that ability to view within that business schools really look for.
Yeah, and again, there's no room for this on a resume.
Right.
There's some room for it for sure in an essay, but sometimes you're limited in your space. And in an interview in a slightly less formal setting, you're able to kind of really talk about very deeply personal moments, and it can be very quick. This doesn't have to be a lengthy thing, but it can just the act of someone who generally has a bravado or a patina of confidence that reveals, vulnerability can be extremely credible. You believe that guy, that they're willing to admit or even ask. This is another good example. It's sort of, I love the inconvenient example. Like even in a success, right? It's like, well, what could I have done better?
Yeah.
Or where did I go wrong? Even, but especially in failure is a little more obvious. But okay, so that's viewing from within. So relatedly, this is our fourth category now. Viewing without. So this is it's similar in a sense, but it's just kind of pointing that same instinct of assessment and analysis, but outside rather than inside. So sometimes you'll get a question. These are, you'll get actual questions. Stanford is sometimes famous for this or associated with it. Who do you think makes for a good leader? What characteristics make for a good leader? What's a bad leader in your opinion? Who are people you admire? Who are business muses that you read, or people that you look up to or are following or curious about? And the idea is, as confident as you are in yourself and your abilities, it says something really interesting if you have the humility to, again, get better. for betterment in general, right? And so obviously it's the most conceited version to look at within you for counsel always on how to get better. So it can be telling where you choose to look for inspiration, or how you choose to deal with all the inputs that are available to you. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in our document, but that's kind of the viewing without component. So it's related to the introspection, but it's just turning it outward.
Yeah, absolutely. The fifth category is real motivation. So I think in a lot of essays and applications, a lot of candidates claim to be passionate about something. It's very easy, it goes hand in hand with your goal. I'm so passionate about this. But like, you want to, in the interview, actually be able to bring that heat to the table, right? It has to be clear that this is something that you really believe in, and that you have a through line within your life story, a tie to it. Even better if you can show them like an actual rudder that has been guiding you through your life, that ties to whatever your goal is or your passion or whatever. Really what we're talking about is that you have a real motivation driving your decision to go to business school, because more than anything else, it tells the business school that you are committed to success. And that even if you don't get the exact job you want, that you're so passionate about this industry or this goal or whatever, that you're going to land something within it, because you just have that drive. So things to think about, things like what matters to you most and why. What are you most proud of? If you retired today and didn't have to work, how would you fill your time? How would you fill your days? Stuff like that is going to start to bring you within this category.
The idea is, if you haven't thought about those at that level,
yeah,
it's nice this is the homework we talk about, right? This is the mastering the narrative homework. So this is, again, we're at the fifth node of it, but to think through these things and to grapple with some of these questions, it gives you access to certain things that it's not like they don't need to ask you a question about, Rob, tell me about your real motivation in life. It can be a story, it can be a question about something completely unrelated, but because you've done this homework, because you've become truly acquainted with some of these driving elements, it's going to slip out in ways that you're either maybe conscious of, or even better, unconscious of. And that is, it's bulletproof. It is more convincing than if you try to hit it on the head. And at that point, it's like, well, I can believe him because he sold it, or maybe I don't believe him, but this is kind of why we're recommending all of this.
Totally.
The other thing that you said that reminded me, I just wanted to mention this, is if you really believe that someone's motivation is so real, and this couples with the sixth element we're going to get to, that they're going to achieve their goal, you can have the net effect of kind of turning the tables on the admissions committee, and the admissions committee now goes, oh, wait a minute, this guy's no longer chasing us. We need to chase this guy, because I am so convinced that he is going to succeed at either what he's doing or maybe something else. We need to make sure that we get him. Okay, again, Stanford's the worst example on earth, because Stanford isn't in the business of chasing people as much. It's the opposite. But that's the kind of mentality that you can, if you're able to succeed at this, that's sort of the effect that you can have on an interviewer, which is the ultimate goal. So finally, our sixth element here is the plan that kind of couples with the rudder, right? Rudder toward what? So we talk about having an excellent plan. We're talking about your goals, your reason for wanting an MBA, your reason for the entire purpose of being in this interview position. So having a really cool sounding goal is one thing. A sexy goal or an exciting goal, whatever. By itself, it's not that meaningful. Having a cool goal that's also achievable is much, much better, right? But having a cool goal that's achievable and is also bulletproof is the ultimate golden chalice. It's the golden nugget. Sorry. when we talk about bulletproof plans, bulletproof goals, right? The idea is um, if you have thought about the ways in which you plan to achieve your goals, and you've kind of blueprinted out you've thought through all of the steps, all of the ways in which you believe you're credible for them, how you're going to parlay step one to step two to step three. But you've also, in what's characteristic of people who are particularly good at this, or I should say particularly convincing, is that they've thought through, well, what happens if a tree falls across the road, right? How am I going to get to my goal? What are my options? And as you're thinking through your plan, if you're thinking about what's your plan B, and you know exactly what it is, um, and you've thought it through to the point where if there's another curveball, another tree that falls on your contingency plan, you have a plan C and a plan D. At some point, again, you don't have to pitch all of these backup plans, but it can be. Here's the point: is that it becomes evident in the way that you talk about your goal. There's something that it sort of it like imbues your words with a kind of confidence. You can tell that this is the kind of guy that actually has the whole thing freaking figured out, to the point where the interviewer goes, "Stop talking. I believe you. I believe that you've thought this through," which is the ultimate prize again, because you sound so convincing. Okay, now the way to do that is to just do your homework, do the deep dive, and figure out, first of all, exactly why elements of your resume make you credible for, the 3 or 5 steps that you've laid out in your short-term goal. All that stuff. And to think, we have a bunch of different cues. Maybe we're running out of time here, but you can look at all that stuff when you look at our spreadsheet. How good does this spreadsheet look, by the way? It's so good. Oh God, so good. It doesn't, by the way. I was just making that up. Now, is this list completely, fully comprehensive? No, but it really does. The idea is that these 6 elements provide a really good starting point. Okay, and for some people, it'll be everything you need. But man, it'll get you going definitely in the right direction. So let's just review those 6 elements we talked about. Leadership was number 1. Breaking the mold, number 2. Viewing within, number 3. Viewing without, number 4. Real motivation, number 5. And having an excellent plan, number 6. So to kind of put a bow around it, this is again the background homework that you're going to do. If you are able to consistently score high along as many of those dimensions all the time, that performance, okay, the result of that will be you will start to get into the above the line category. These are the things that make you that promote you to above the line compared to the other guy who is not doing as well along those categories. So okay, that's the background. And the final component to this section, Rob, maybe you can talk through actually what a candidate who's watching this can do with their stories. How do they actually use this rubric?
Yeah. Okay. So there's 4 steps, and I'll dive into each. But you want to identify your greatest hits. You want to rank them. You want to extract the hidden gold, and then you want to practice. So talking about identifying your greatest hits, this is an Admissionado classic. We talk about it all the time. These are the stories that make you exceptional, right? These are your best achievement stories. These are your best defining moment, your lessons learned stories. Like, go through and just make a list of your greatest hits. Then what you want to do is you want to rank them. So, maybe you've got 5, maybe you've got 10, but you need to know which are the strongest, right? Like which cover the most bases, or which have the best ending, or the biggest impact, whatever it is. Go take your greatest hits and then put them in a merit order, 1 to 10, 1 to 5, 1 to 7, whatever it is. Then you want to take these to the grid that we've been talking about. And this is where you're in step 3, and you're sort of extracting that hidden gold. You're panning for gold, right? So you take these stories back to the grid, and you start thinking about, okay, like in column D within each of these, potential questions within the category, how could this story maybe fit that, right? How could this plug into this question about leadership, or this question about, viewing within and introspection, or, viewing outside, like thinking about others. Once you go through and do that, all of a sudden you're going to see which of your greatest hits really start to cover the most bases and have the most potential. And it starts getting you to think in a flexible way about your stories, right? So this greatest hit, your top hit, your best story, it turns out it can probably actually maybe cover a couple of different prompts, a couple of different questions. If you come at it from different angles, you start reframing it, or you emphasize this thing over that thing. All of a sudden, this story, your greatest hit, the one you absolutely have to tell during the interview, it could cover 6, 7, 8 different prompts. And you're probably going to get one of those. And so if it comes up, you want to make sure you know how that greatest hit can plug into that story and how you're framing it for that. And then the last step is just practice, right? You want to get a list of commonly asked questions, randomly pick any question off of there, and then see if you can tell that story. Like practice spinning your greatest hit to match that story by emphasizing different aspects of the story.
And those aspects, hopefully, if you'll start to, when you use this process, and you can use it as literally or as just sort of inspirationally as you wish, but if you kind of tease out some of the ways in which in each of those 6 sections, the specific elements that's the issue. So the leadership traits that you want to highlight and the breaking the mold traits. When you're telling your greatest hit story, you're going to kind of weave those elements into your final product, right? And then here's the key to your last point, which is now have someone ask a very different question, but utilizing that same story. You're going to utilize the same story to answer their question, but you can use the homework that you've done here as your North Star to kind of make sure that as you're answering their questions, you are still focusing on breaking the mold components and very important leadership components and introspection components. So here's what happens. This training, this is why we recommend this, it develops the kind of muscle memory in you that at some point you will no longer need to use the spreadsheet, right? It'll become so intuitive to think about a story, and you'll start to automatically touch on breaking the mold things unconsciously. You're not even going to be aware of it. And you're going to start to hit on introspective elements to it. And you're going to start to automatically talk about isolate specific elements of the leadership that are noteworthy and worth talking about. That's the whole point, is that when you go through this, by the time you've done it 6, 7, 8, 10 times, now anyone can ask you any question in any variety, and you can confidently, very, smarmily, just dip into your bag of tricks and spin and make sure you're hitting all the right elements. Okay, but answer anyone's question at any moment, right? So that's kind of the whole idea. Now, this rubric, what we just went through, this list of 6 things, that's your 90%. Okay, so that's the homework that you do. That's when we talk about mastering the narrative, that's what we're talking about. For that final 10%, remember, focus it on that one specific question, that one chemical reaction of being able to really sell the admissions committee on why their school, their environment plus you leads to the best you. So that's section 3. We made it. Kind of want to take another drink just to celebrate that.
Yeah,
rubric.
Stretch.
We did it. All right. So final thoughts. Let's just wrap it up here. Number 1, we determined that one strategy to rule them all. Again, I want to say that's Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah, I think so.
One ring to something or other. One something. I don't know.
It's probably a clip we cannot cut to.
That's fair.
You can't licensing rights.
That's right. We've broken all sorts of copyright. We've referenced McDonald's, Michael Mann's Heat, and Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So we'll just bleep those out and put some generic. Yeah. But sorry. So to recap, so that's recap number 1. Recap number 2 is, okay, one strategy, which is our 90-10. 90%, go through this list and get all of your stuff. Know thyself so well that you are invulnerable to curveballs, okay? and then the final 10% on the why this school piece, and then use this tool, this rubric, to develop the memory, the muscle memory, the mental gears. So the idea is not to lead to scripted responses. You don't want to sound scripted at all, but you want to develop the instincts to answer any question and be able to draw on the most meaningful, important elements. So that's the entire point. So the final thing we'll say is that remember, Stanford is a great school to pick at because it is literally at the very tippity top of the list. And these sort of still apply to all schools. You can't fake your way into being like Stanford appropriate. There's no magical thing that you can say to trick someone on the other side to thinking that you've got the goods. You need to have the goods, okay? Now, the flip side, though, is true. You can have the goods, and if you haven't done the homework, there is a version where it doesn't shine through in the key moment, which is kind of that's really our audience here, is the people who are sort of, they've got it, they've gotten to this stage, they are probably above the line people, and we just want to make sure that you don't misstep and flub it in the final moment. That's it. Rob, thank you so much for joining me in your middling 45-degree. It's a win. It's March. We'll allow it again. And thanks very much to our really good friends at GMAT Club for coming up with this idea and inviting us. In terms of this document, we will make it available somehow. Some people will do some stuff, and there'll be a link or something. Email us if not, info@admissionado.com, or probably there's a link for you to get access to this thing.
Your screen right now.
Somewhere on somewhere.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Hope this was helpful. Bye.
Bye.